My name is Robert Mitchell, and for 8 years I believed I had optimized my life perfectly. As a financial advisor managing $50 million in assets for high net worth clients in downtown Seattle, I approached everything, including my marriage, with the same methodical precision I used to build investment portfolios. That precision would eventually become both my greatest strength and my most devastating blind spot. Catherine Williams and I met at a professional networking event at the Four Seasons downtown. She was sharp, articulate, and ambitious, a marketing director at Cascade Digital, one of the city's most prestigious tech firms. Our courtship unfolded like a well-structured business proposal. We shared compatible career trajectories, complementary skill sets, and identical 5-year growth targets. When we married, it felt less like romance and more like the formation of a strategic partnership optimized for maximum return on investment. "We're building something sustainable here," Catherine told me on our wedding night in our newly purchased Capitol Hill townhouse, already discussing our combined earning potential over champagne. No emotional volatility, no irrational decisions, just pure, calculated growth. I couldn't have agreed more. We had explicitly decided against children during our 6-month engagement planning process. Dependence would dilute our earning potential and introduce unnecessary variables into our carefully calibrated lifestyle. Instead, we focused on building our professional brands with the same intensity other couples brought to family planning. I handled our investment portfolio and retirement projections with the same attention I gave my wealthiest clients. Every month, I produced detailed reports showing our net worth growth, expense optimization opportunities, and progress toward our financial independence targets. Catherine managed what she called our stakeholder relations, our social calendar, professional networking, and public image. She maintained detailed spreadsheets tracking which events would maximize our professional exposure, which couples we should cultivate as strategic relationships, and which charities would provide optimal networking opportunities relative to our contribution levels. For nearly a decade, this arrangement worked flawlessly. Our net worth grew by 12% annually, significantly outpacing both market returns and our peer group. Our professional networks expanded strategically across Seattle's tech and finance communities. We attended the right events, cultivated the right relationships, and maintained the right image. Catherine's career accelerated from marketing director to senior marketing director to VP of brand strategy, with each promotion accompanied by stock option packages and expanded responsibilities. My client roster expanded from affluent professionals to ultra-high net worth families, tech executives, and successful entrepreneurs. We were the couple other ambitious professionals pointed to as an example of how to do marriage correctly. Seattle Metropolitan featured us in their Power Couples issue, highlighting our combined income, strategic approach to wealth building, and what the article called our refreshingly practical approach to modern partnership. We spoke at investment conferences about optimizing household financial strategies and treating marriage as a growth-oriented business partnership. Our Capitol Hill townhouse became a showcase for our success. Minimalist design, high-end appliances, and a home office equipped with dual monitors for conducting evening investment research. We hosted quarterly dinner parties for carefully selected combinations of clients, colleagues, and potential business partners. Catherine planned these events with the precision of a military campaign, creating detailed profiles of each guest, conversation topics that would maximize cross-networking opportunities, and strategic seating arrangements designed to catalyze specific business relationships. I genuinely believed we had cracked the code on modern marriage. We had eliminated the emotional inefficiencies, communication breakdowns, and resource conflicts that destroyed other relationships. We operated like a well-managed corporation with clearly defined roles, shared objectives, and systematic approaches to decision-making. The first crack in our perfect system appeared on a Tuesday morning in March, during my routine monthly expense reconciliation. I treated our household finances with the same rigor I applied to client portfolios, categorizing every transaction and analyzing spending patterns for optimization opportunities. This process usually took 30 minutes and revealed nothing more interesting than which restaurants offered the best value for client entertainment or which service providers deserved contract renewals. That morning, however, the data told a different story. Catherine's corporate credit card showed a pattern I couldn't immediately categorize. Over the past 6 months, she had charged expensive dinners at upscale venues during what her shared calendar marked as client acquisition dinners and strategic offsites. The timing was peculiar. Many of these charges occurred on evenings when I knew her team was in the office late, working on quarterly projections for their largest client, a sustainable energy startup seeking Series B funding. I pulled additional data points using the same forensic accounting techniques I employed for due diligence on potential investments. Hotel charges at the Bellevue Hyatt during what should have been local client meetings, expensive wine selections at venues like Canlis and the Herb Farm that seemed inconsistent with Catherine's usual preference for efficiency over indulgence. Spa services at the Fairmont Olympic during what her calendar marked as strategy development sessions. A pattern emerged when I cross-referenced the dates with Cascade Digital's organizational chart and recent personnel changes. The correlation was statistically significant and deeply troubling. Marcus Webb had joined Catherine's company 6 months ago as VP of Operations, recruited directly from McKinsey's Seattle office after completing a 3-year engagement with Amazon's logistics division. A quick LinkedIn review revealed an impressive resume: Harvard MBA, McKinsey Partner Track, expertise in operational efficiency and client acquisition strategies. His background included successful consulting engagements with Fortune 500 companies, published articles in Harvard Business Review, and speaking engagements at major industry conferences. The timing of Marcus's arrival correlated perfectly with the unusual expense patterns on Catherine's card. More concerning, the dates of these expenses aligned with periods when Catherine had been working late on what she described as high-level strategic initiatives that required intensive collaboration with senior leadership. I spent the next week conducting what I privately called a forensic analysis of our relationship, applying the same methodical investigation techniques I used when evaluating potential investment fraud. The data was conclusive. Catherine had optimized our marriage by introducing a parallel relationship with Marcus, maintaining the same principles of efficiency and minimal operational risk that had always governed our partnership. Her approach was almost admirable in its systematic thoroughness. I documented everything: credit card statements, calendar correlations, expense patterns, timeline analysis, and probability calculations. Catherine had been conducting her affair with the same methodical precision she brought to marketing campaigns, scheduled efficiently, executed professionally, and managed to minimize operational disruption to our primary partnership. When I confronted Catherine that Friday evening, I presented my findings with the same professional detachment I used for client portfolio reviews. I had prepared a comprehensive presentation using our home office projector, complete with charts showing expense patterns, timeline correlations, and probability analyses that would have impressed any corporate board. The data indicates you've been maintaining a secondary relationship with Marcus Webb for approximately 6 months, I said, advancing to the first slide on my laptop. The expense patterns are conclusive, and the operational timeline suggests a high level of strategic planning. Catherine set down her wine glass, a 2018 Domaine de la Côte Pinot Noir that we had purchased as part of our quarterly wine allocation strategy, and studied my presentation with the same analytical focus she brought to quarterly budget reviews. She didn't deny anything, didn't express surprise at being discovered, and showed no emotional reaction to my documentation. Instead, she nodded slowly, as if reviewing a colleague's competent analysis of market trends. "Your research methodology is sound," she said, after reviewing several slides. "Though I would characterize this as portfolio diversification rather than a secondary relationship." I advanced to the next slide, which showed a detailed timeline of their relationship development phases. "Could you elaborate on the strategic rationale?" Catherine stood and moved to our whiteboard. Yes, we had a professional-grade whiteboard in our living room for financial planning sessions and investment strategy discussions. She began sketching what looked like an organizational chart, the same visual framework she used for mapping client relationship management strategies. "Our marriage has consistently underperformed on intimacy metrics for the past 3 years," she said, drawing boxes representing different aspects of our relationship and connecting them with arrows indicating performance levels. Traditional approaches to improving these metrics, counseling, date nights, weekend getaways, require significant time investment with uncertain ROI and no guarantee of sustainable improvement. She drew another box labeled Marcus and connected it to her box with a green arrow indicating positive performance indicators. Meanwhile, Marcus and I discovered exceptional operational synergy during our Q3 strategy sessions for the renewable energy client, she continued. The relationship delivers high emotional returns with minimal time investment, leverages our existing professional network, and creates no conflicts with our core partnership objectives. From an efficiency standpoint, it's an elegant solution to what would otherwise be a resource-intensive problem. I stared at the diagram, watching Catherine add additional boxes for professional development, network expansion, and personal satisfaction metrics. In another context, I might have admired the logical framework and systematic thinking. Instead, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, a complete disconnection from the analytical model that had governed my entire adult life. "You're treating our marriage like a hedge fund portfolio," I said. "I'm treating it like what it's always been," Catherine replied, capping the marker and turning to face me with the same confident expression she used during client presentations. "A strategic alliance optimized for mutual benefit. The only difference is that I've identified an opportunity to improve overall returns while maintaining our core asset allocation." She walked to our dining room table and returned with a bound document that had been sitting next to her laptop. "Which brings me to my proposal." Catherine had prepared for this conversation as thoroughly as she prepared for board presentations. The document was titled Partnership Restructuring Proposal, Optimizing for Multiple Stakeholder Value Creation, and included a table of contents, executive summary, and detailed appendices. "Rather than dissolving our partnership over a single component optimization," she said, handing me the document, I propose we restructure our arrangement to accommodate parallel relationships while maintaining our shared assets and professional networks. I opened the document and found 8 pages of analysis that could have been a McKinsey consulting report. It included sections on asset protection strategies, brand management protocols, operational efficiency improvements, and risk mitigation frameworks. She had thought through everything: how we would handle social events without creating awkward dynamics, how to maintain professional credibility within our shared network, tax implications of various arrangement structures, even protocols for managing potential conflicts between our respective emotional vendor relationships. The core partnership remains intact, Catherine continued, settling into presentation mode. Joint finances, shared residence, coordinated professional branding, and mutual support for career advancement objectives. The only modification is that we each gain autonomy over what I call emotional fulfillment sourcing, allowing us to optimize personal satisfaction without disrupting our primary value creation framework. Before I could respond, our doorbell rang. Catherine checked her Apple Watch with the same precise timing awareness she brought to client meetings. "That would be Marcus," she said. "I thought it would be more efficient if he participated in this discussion directly, rather than conducting separate stakeholder conversations that might lead to miscommunication or suboptimal outcomes." Marcus Webb stood at our front door, wearing a perfectly tailored navy Tom Ford suit and holding a leather Hermes portfolio. He was exactly what I had expected from his LinkedIn profile and professional background: tall, confident, and carrying himself with the polished assurance of someone accustomed to walking into Fortune 500 boardrooms and taking control of complex negotiations. "Robert," he said, extending his hand with the firm grip of someone who had spent years building trust with C-suite executives. "I appreciate you taking this meeting. I know the timing isn't ideal, but I believe we can find a framework that maximizes value creation for everyone involved." Catherine gestured for us to sit at our dining room table, the same custom walnut table where we had negotiated our prenuptial agreement 8 years earlier, working through asset protection strategies and financial responsibility allocations with the precision of a corporate merger. Marcus opened his portfolio and pulled out what appeared to be a professionally printed presentation deck. "First, I want to acknowledge that this situation involves significant emotional complexity," Marcus began, his consulting training evident in his structured approach to sensitive conversations. "However, I believe we can approach it using proven business frameworks that maximize stakeholder value while minimizing operational disruption." He opened to his first slide: Partnership Optimization, a 3-party value creation model. "Catherine and I have conducted extensive analysis of our operational synergies over the past 6 months," he continued with the same confidence he had probably used to present transformation strategies to Amazon's executive team. "The data shows exceptional compatibility across multiple performance metrics: communication efficiency, strategic alignment, execution velocity, and what we might diplomatically call engagement satisfaction indicators." Marcus advanced to his next slide, which showed a Venn diagram with 3 circles labeled Robert, Catherine, and Marcus, with overlapping areas highlighting shared professional networks, complementary skill sets, and mutual value creation opportunities. The traditional model assumes that partnership optimization requires exclusive allocation of emotional and operational resources, he said, pointing to areas where the circles overlapped. However, Modern portfolio theory suggests that diversification actually reduces risk while maintaining or improving overall returns. We're simply applying these proven principles to relationship management. I found myself listening with the same detached fascination I felt when clients explained their investment philosophies, even when those philosophies were fundamentally flawed. Marcus was applying McKinsey-level strategic thinking to relationship management, treating emotional connections like market inefficiencies that could be arbitraged for superior returns. Here's what I propose, Marcus continued, advancing to a slide titled Proposed Operating Model. You, Robert, optimize everything you choose to focus on: your clients, your investment strategies, your professional reputation. You bring methodical excellence and analytical precision to whatever captures your attention. I optimize operational systems, efficiency improvements, and scalable processes. Catherine and I have discovered we have exceptional operational synergy in areas where your marriage had become, frankly, underperforming. He turned to a slide showing a complex organizational chart with reporting relationships, resource allocation frameworks, and performance measurement systems. Catherine and I continue developing our partnership while you and Catherine maintain your legal and financial partnership structure, Marcus explained. Everyone focuses on their areas of highest value creation and competitive advantage. No one has to sacrifice existing investments, professional relationships, or financial security. It's a win-win-win scenario that optimizes outcomes for all stakeholders. Catherine leaned forward, adding her own analysis. It's actually an elegant solution to what would otherwise be a devastating portfolio liquidation event. Divorce would destroy significant value through legal fees, asset division, professional network disruption, and reputational damage. This approach preserves all existing value while creating new value streams. I looked at both of them, Catherine with her analytical expression and Marcus with his consultant's confidence, and realized I was experiencing something unprecedented in our 8-year marriage. For the first time, I was completely outside their optimization framework. They had solved our relationship challenges the same way they solved business problems, treating emotional complexity as a systems integration challenge. What if I refuse this proposal? I asked. Marcus and Catherine exchanged a glance that conveyed entire conversations they had obviously conducted about various scenario planning outcomes. Then we would need to explore alternative value creation strategies, Marcus said carefully, his consulting training evident in his diplomatic language. Catherine was more direct. Then we would need to consider whether our current partnership structure remains viable for any of the stakeholders involved. The implication was clear. If I didn't accept their optimization proposal, they would pursue the relationship anyway, forcing a divorce that would be considerably more expensive and disruptive for everyone involved. I spent that weekend analyzing their proposal with the same thoroughness I applied to major investment decisions. I reviewed every page of Catherine's documentation, researched similar arrangement structures, and even consulted discreetly with a family law attorney about the legal implications of various partnership modifications. The financial logic was sound. The operational framework was sophisticated. The risk mitigation strategies were comprehensive. By every metric I had used to evaluate decisions for the past decade, their proposal made perfect sense. Catherine and Marcus had identified a genuine inefficiency in traditional relationship structures and developed an innovative solution that could theoretically maximize outcomes for everyone involved. Which is why I finally understood that the metrics themselves were the problem. For 8 years, I had optimized our marriage for variables that could be measured, tracked, and improved systematically. We had maximized financial returns, professional advancement, and operational efficiency. We had minimized conflict, resource waste, and emotional volatility. By every quantifiable standard, our marriage had been extraordinarily successful. But we had optimized for everything except the experiences that actually made relationships meaningful. We had never prioritized connection over efficiency, growth over stability, or love over strategic advantage. We had built a partnership that worked perfectly on paper while failing completely as a human experience. Monday morning, I called Davidson and Associates, the most respected family law firm in Seattle, and filed for divorce. Catherine's response was swift, systematic, and devastating. Within a week, I received a formal letter from her legal team outlining what they called partnership dissolution protocols. She wasn't fighting the divorce emotionally. She was treating it like a corporate restructuring, with detailed analyses of asset division strategies, network relationship management, and reputation preservation frameworks. Her legal strategy was designed to minimize her costs while maximizing my operational disruption. She proposed keeping the townhouse, the majority of our investment accounts, and our shared professional relationships, while ensuring I bore responsibility for most of the legal fees and transition costs. Her attorneys had obviously spent considerable time developing approaches that would force me into either accepting a disadvantageous settlement or engaging in expensive litigation that would damage my professional reputation. Marcus's response was more subtle and considerably more dangerous to my career. The first indication came during my quarterly client review with the Hendersons, a retired couple whose portfolio I had managed for 6 years. Richard Henderson had built a successful engineering consultancy before selling it for $37 million, and his wife Marie had been a high school principal for 30 years before retiring with a substantial pension. They were exactly the kind of steady, long-term clients who form the foundation of my practice. Financially sophisticated, risk-averse, and primarily interested in wealth preservation rather than aggressive growth. "Robert," Richard said, settling into the chair across from my desk in our usual conference room, "we received an interesting invitation last week." He handed me an elegant card printed on heavy cream cardstock with embossed lettering. "Marcus Webb, VP of Operations, Cascade Strategic Solutions, cordially invites you to an exclusive evening. Advanced portfolio strategies for discerning investors. Institutional-level wealth management for serious families. Tuesday, April 15th, 7 p.m., the Columbia Tower Club." The invitation came with a personal note, Marie added, pulling out a handwritten card on matching stationery. Mr. Webb mentioned that he had worked with some of our financial data during a consulting engagement and had identified some significant optimization opportunities we might find interesting. Richard leaned forward with the concerned expression he had probably used during difficult conversations with clients at his engineering firm. He also mentioned, very subtly you understand, that you had recently transitioned to focus on smaller-scale client relationships, and that he could provide institutional-level strategies for families who needed more sophisticated approaches than traditional advisors typically offered. I felt something cold settle in my stomach as I read Marcus's note. He was launching a systematic client acquisition campaign using insider knowledge of my practice, my clients' financial situations, and my professional relationships. The invitation was professionally crafted to plant doubt about my capabilities while positioning himself as the premium alternative for serious investors. "What did you tell him?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. "We told him we were perfectly satisfied with our current advisor and had no interest in exploring alternatives," Marie said firmly. "But Robert, we wanted you to know this was happening. Several couples in our investment club received similar invitations. Over the next 2 weeks, similar invitations went out to 8 of my highest value clients, each one personalized with specific references to their portfolios and subtle implications about my limitations. Marcus's approach was subtle but devastating. He never directly criticized my work, but consistently implied that serious investors deserved more sophisticated strategies than I could provide. He positioned himself as offering institutional-level wealth management and McKinsey-trained strategic thinking, while suggesting I had transitioned to smaller-scale relationships and was more suitable for clients with simpler needs. The language was carefully chosen to create doubt about my capabilities without making any claims that could be challenged legally. The regulatory complaint arrived on a Thursday morning in early May, delivered by a certified mail from the Washington State Department of Financial Institutions. Someone had filed a formal complaint alleging that I had engaged in unsuitable investment recommendations, excessive trading, and inadequate disclosure of conflicts of interest in managing client accounts. The complaint was professionally written, technically sophisticated, and designed to trigger the most extensive possible investigation of my practice. It cited specific regulations, referenced particular client transactions, and included detailed allegations that would require weeks of documentation review and client interviews to resolve. Catherine's fingerprints were all over the regulatory complaint, though she had been careful to route it through her professional network rather than filing it directly. The complaint demonstrated intimate knowledge of financial regulations, my client relationships, and the specific compliance issues that would trigger the most extensive investigation and maximum professional disruption. While I was dealing with regulatory investigators reviewing 5 years of client files, transaction records, and compliance documentation, Marcus accelerated his client acquisition efforts. He had moved from subtle invitations to direct outreach, calling my clients to schedule complimentary portfolio reviews that would identify systematic underperformance and missed optimization opportunities in their current investment strategies. Most of my clients remained loyal, particularly the families who had worked with me for several years and understood my investment philosophy. But Marcus succeeded in poaching 3 families representing nearly $12 million in assets. Each departure followed the same pattern. Marcus would present a sophisticated analysis showing how their portfolios were under-optimized, recommend a complex restructuring involving high-fee products and alternative investments, and suggest that their current advisor lacked the expertise to implement institutional-level strategies. The Hendersons forwarded me one of Marcus's follow-up presentations after declining his services. It was a masterpiece of sophisticated marketing designed to create doubt about traditional investment approaches. Marcus had analyzed their portfolio using complex risk metrics, identified inefficiencies in their asset allocation, and proposed a restructuring that would involve private equity investments, structured products, and alternative strategies that carried substantially higher fees. "Robert," Richard told me during our next meeting, "his analysis was impressive, but something felt wrong about the whole approach. It seemed like he was more interested in convincing us that our current strategy was inadequate than in understanding what we actually needed." By early June, I faced a choice that would define everything that followed. David Morrison, my largest client, had built a technology company from a garage startup to a billion-dollar enterprise before taking it public in a successful IPO that had created substantial wealth for early employees and investors. As the founder and CEO, David's portfolio represented nearly $15 million in assets under my management. David was also the kind of person who attracted other high-net-worth individuals to my practice simply through his reputation and referrals within Seattle's tech community. David called me on a Tuesday morning with what he described as a time-sensitive opportunity that required immediate analysis and decision-making. "Robert, I've been approached by a private equity group about a structured investment product," he said, his voice carrying the same urgency he probably used during crucial business negotiations. "The projected returns are exceptional, potentially 30% annually for the next 5 years. The minimum investment is $10 million, and they're only offering it to a select group of high-net-worth individuals. I need someone I trust to evaluate the offering and structure the investment if it makes sense." He emailed me the prospectus that afternoon, along with additional marketing materials and performance projections. The product was extraordinarily complex, a multi-layered structured note tied to emerging market currencies, private equity investments in Southeast Asian technology companies, and derivative instruments that I needed several hours to fully understand. The marketing materials were sophisticated and convincing, featuring testimonials from supposedly satisfied investors, historical performance data showing consistent returns, and endorsements from recognized financial institutions. The private equity group, Meridian Capital Partners, had impressive credentials and claimed to manage over $2 billion in alternative investments. However, my detailed analysis revealed several concerning aspects of the investment structure. The fee schedule was buried in 40 pages of legal documentation, but my calculations showed that the total costs would consume nearly 8% of the investment annually through management fees, performance fees, administrative costs, and hidden transaction expenses. More troubling, the product contained provisions that would essentially transfer all of David's liquid assets into illiquid investments with severe early withdrawal penalties. If anything went wrong with his business, personal finances, or family situation, he would be unable to access his money for 5 years without paying penalties that could consume up to 30% of his investment. The underlying investments were far riskier than the marketing materials suggested. The Southeast Asian technology companies were early-stage ventures with limited operating histories. The currency exposure would make the investment extremely vulnerable to international market volatility. The derivative strategies were complex enough that even sophisticated investors would have difficulty understanding the actual risk profile. Most revealing was the commission structure, which I discovered by carefully reading the subscription documents and fee disclosures. Any advisor who sold this product would receive a front-end commission of 12%, nearly $2 million on David's investment size. The commission was structured as a placement fee and disguised within the complex fee schedule, but it represented the largest single payment I would ever receive for any transaction. I recognized the product immediately. Marcus had been promoting similar structured instruments to the clients he had poached from my practice, using the same sophisticated marketing materials and complex performance projections. The private equity group had likely approached David through Marcus's network, but they needed an existing trusted advisor to actually execute the transaction. I spent 2 days analyzing the product from every angle, hoping to find some scenario where it made financial sense for David. I modeled different market conditions, stress-tested the underlying assumptions, and compared the risk-adjusted returns to simpler investment alternatives. The mathematics were unforgiving. Even under the most optimistic projections, David would earn higher risk-adjusted returns in a simple portfolio of low-cost index funds and high-quality bonds. Under realistic scenarios, the structured product would destroy roughly 40% of his wealth over 5 years through fees, poor performance, and opportunity costs. But the commission, $2 million, would solve every financial problem the divorce and client defections had created. It would allow me to rebuild my practice, hire additional staff, expand my marketing efforts, and compete directly with Marcus's sophisticated client acquisition operation. I could use the money to weather the regulatory investigation, upgrade my technology infrastructure, and potentially launch my own alternative investment platform. David called Friday morning to schedule a meeting for the following week. I've done some preliminary research, and this looks like exactly the kind of opportunity I've been waiting for, he said, his enthusiasm evident. I'm ready to move forward with the full $10 million investment. I just need you to structure everything and handle the paperwork. The private equity group says we need to execute by the end of next week to secure the current terms and get into their next investment cycle. I could have scheduled the meeting, presented the investment in the most favorable light possible, and collected the largest commission of my career. David trusted me completely. He would sign whatever documents I put in front of him, wire the money based on my recommendation, and never question my judgment. The $2 million commission would solve my immediate financial pressures and position me to build a much larger practice. Instead, I did something that surprised even myself. David, before we meet, I need to be completely transparent with you about this opportunity, I said. I've completed my analysis, and I believe this investment would be devastating for your long-term financial security. There was a long pause on the phone. I could hear David moving papers on his desk, probably reviewing the marketing materials that had convinced him the opportunity was legitimate. Devastating how? He asked, his voice shifting from enthusiasm to concern. The fee structure would consume roughly 40% of your returns even if the investment performed exactly as projected, I said. The liquidity restrictions would prevent you from accessing your money if you needed it for business opportunities, family emergencies, or market corrections. And the underlying assets are far riskier than the marketing materials suggest. I spent the next 20 minutes walking David through my detailed analysis, explaining exactly why the product was structured to benefit the private equity group and the selling advisor rather than the investor. I showed him how the complex fee structure worked, how the performance projections were based on unrealistic assumptions, and how the liquidity restrictions would limit his financial flexibility for years. The most troubling aspect, I continued, is that any advisor who sells this product receives a commission of 12%, nearly $2 million on your investment size. That commission structure creates an enormous incentive for advisors to recommend the product regardless of whether it's suitable for the client. David was quiet for a moment, processing the implications of what I was telling him. So, you're recommending I pass on this opportunity? He asked. I'm recommending you run from it as fast as possible, I said. And I think you should know that this same product has been sold to several other high-net-worth individuals in our area through a systematic marketing campaign designed to transfer wealth from investors to financial intermediaries. David was silent for nearly a minute, and I began to worry that my honesty had damaged our relationship irreparably. Finally, he spoke. Robert, I appreciate your honesty more than you know, he said. Most advisors would have taken the commission and figured out how to justify it later. The fact that you're walking away from $2 million to protect my interests tells me everything I need to know about your integrity." That conversation became the turning point for everything that followed. David not only declined the structured product, but began referring other business owners to my practice, specifically because of what he called my radical honesty about product conflicts. Within 6 months, these referrals brought in more assets than Marcus had poached from my original client base. More importantly, the new clients were attracted to my practice specifically because they wanted an advisor who would prioritize their interests over commission opportunities. Word began spreading through Seattle's tight-knit financial community about the structured product sales campaign. David mentioned my analysis to several other tech executives who had been approached with similar opportunities. When they began asking questions about fee structures and performance assumptions, they discovered that many supposedly sophisticated investment products were designed primarily to generate commissions for advisors rather than returns for investors. A financial journalist at the Seattle Business Journal began investigating after three prominent business leaders complained about high-pressure sales tactics and inadequate disclosure of fees and risks. The resulting investigation revealed that several local advisors had been systematically marketing complex, high-fee products to wealthy individuals who would have been better served by simpler, lower-cost alternatives. The Business Journal article, published in August, exposed the entire operation and named Marcus specifically as someone who had been aggressively marketing high-fee structured products to investors who would be better served by traditional portfolio management approaches. The article included interviews with several investors who had purchased the products and subsequently discovered that their returns were being consumed by excessive fees and poor performance. The regulatory audit of my practice concluded in September with a perfect compliance record. The investigators not only found no evidence of unsuitable recommendations, excessive trading, or inadequate disclosure, but commended my documentation standards, client communication practices, and what they called my exemplary approach to managing conflicts of interest. The clean audit became part of my public record, verified proof that my practice met the highest ethical standards during a period when other advisors were being investigated for questionable sales practices. Several clients mentioned that the regulatory clearance had reinforced their confidence in my integrity and professional competence. Marcus's reputation suffered considerably more damage. The Business Journal article led to internal questions at Cascade Digital about potential conflicts of interest between his operational role and his investment marketing activities. Several clients who had purchased the structured products demanded explanations when the investments began underperforming immediately after the initial lockup period expired. The regulatory investigation expanded to include Marcus's activities when former clients filed complaints about inadequate disclosure and unsuitable recommendations. While he avoided formal sanctions, the negative publicity and client complaints led to his resignation from Cascade Digital in October. Catherine's role in the regulatory complaint became apparent when the investigators interviewed several of my clients about their experiences with various advisors. Two clients mentioned receiving calls from Catherine asking whether they had any concerns about their current advisor's investment recommendations or trading activity. The investigators flagged this as potential witness tampering, though they declined to pursue formal charges due to insufficient evidence of intent to obstruct justice. By the time our divorce was finalized that November, the professional dynamics had completely reversed. My practice was growing rapidly based on referrals from clients who valued ethical advice over sophisticated marketing. Marcus had left Seattle for a position in Denver, after his reputation in the local financial community became untenable. Catherine remained at Cascade Digital, but her association with Marcus's failed investment marketing campaign had damaged her credibility within their shared professional network. During this tumultuous period, I met Elena Vasquez. I had started volunteering at Northwest Family Financial Services, a nonprofit organization that provided financial counseling to families dealing with medical bankruptcy, job loss, and other financial crises. The work gave me perspective on how financial stress affected people whose primary concern wasn't optimizing investment returns, but simply surviving unexpected emergencies while maintaining their dignity and hope for the future. Elena was a nurse practitioner at Seattle Children's Hospital who volunteered as a patient advocate, helping families navigate the insurance and billing processes that often determined whether medical emergencies became financial disasters. She approached financial challenges with the same systematic problem-solving skills I used for investment analysis, but her motivation was entirely different. She wanted to help people rather than optimize outcomes for her own benefit. "You're the financial advisor who works for free on weekends," she said when we were introduced at a volunteer training session in December. "I've heard patients mention your name. They say you actually explain things in ways they can understand instead of trying to sell them products they don't need." Elena was direct, competent, and completely unimpressed by wealth or professional status. She had a 10-year-old son named Diego from a previous relationship with a man who had struggled with addiction and eventually disappeared from their lives entirely. She approached single parenthood with the same methodical care she brought to nursing, but with a warmth and emotional intelligence that I had never learned to cultivate. When I eventually met Diego, he immediately reminded me why Catherine and I had been fundamentally wrong about children being portfolio diversifiers rather than long-term investments in something more meaningful than financial returns. Diego was curious, energetic, and possessed the kind of natural optimism that made adults remember why life was worth optimizing in the first place. Elena and I began spending time together outside of volunteer work, coffee after training sessions, family dinners with Diego, weekend activities that had nothing to do with professional networking or career advancement. For the first time in my adult life, I experienced a relationship based on genuine compatibility rather than strategic optimization. "You think about everything like it's a math problem," Elena told me one evening as we watched Diego work on homework at her kitchen table in her modest Ballard apartment. "But you don't treat people like variables in your equations. That's a rare combination." She was right. I had learned to apply analytical thinking to relationships without becoming transactional about them. The difference was subtle but fundamental. I use systematic approaches to understand how to support people rather than how to extract value from them. My relationship with Elena taught me that the most meaningful aspects of partnership couldn't be systematized or optimized through traditional frameworks. They required presence, vulnerability, and commitment to outcomes I couldn't control or predict. Diego taught me that investing in someone else's growth without expecting measurable returns was more satisfying than any financial achievement I had accomplished. Catherine made one final attempt at reconciliation the following spring. She called in April to schedule what she described as a post-dissolution analysis meeting at Victrola Coffee on Capitol Hill, the same cafe where we had planned our wedding 8 years earlier. When I arrived, she had prepared another presentation, this one titled "Optimizing for Changed Market Conditions, a Partnership Resumption Analysis." "I've been analyzing the outcomes from our partnership dissolution over the past 12 months, she said, opening her laptop at our corner table. The data suggests we may have made a suboptimal decision based on incomplete information and emotional volatility rather than strategic thinking. Catherine had apparently spent considerable time tracking my professional recovery, Elena's role in my life, Diego's impact on my priorities, and what she called my pivot to a value-based service model. Her analysis was thorough and accurate. My practice was more profitable than it had ever been, my professional reputation was stronger, and my personal satisfaction metrics had improved significantly according to observable indicators. I believe we could restructure our partnership to incorporate the lessons learned from this transitional period, she continued, advancing through slides that analyzed various partnership resumption scenarios. You've clearly identified a successful approach to relationship management, and I've gained valuable insights about operational efficiency in emotional resource allocation. She showed me projected outcomes for various partnership models, including scenarios where Elena and Diego would be integrated into our extended household framework as what she called value-added family components. Market timing suggests this could be an optimal re-entry point, she said, reaching the final slide in her presentation. Your brand value has increased substantially. My reputation has stabilized after the temporary setback with Marcus, and we have significantly better data about sustainable operational parameters for long-term partnership success. I listened to her entire presentation with the same detached interest I might show for a client's outdated investment strategy. When she finished, I closed her laptop gently and looked at the woman I had been married to for 8 years. Catherine, I think you're missing the fundamental insight from all your data analysis, I said. Which insight? She asked, her expression showing genuine curiosity about what optimization opportunity she might have overlooked. Optimization was never the problem, I said. The problem was that we were optimizing for the wrong variables. Catherine looked genuinely confused, the same expression she used when clients presented investment objectives that didn't fit standard portfolio optimization models. I don't understand. Our partnership optimization framework delivered exceptional results across all measurable outcomes: financial growth, career advancement, professional recognition, social positioning. Even our dissolution was managed more efficiently than most divorces. You're still thinking about relationships as systems to be engineered for maximum efficiency, I said. But the most important aspects of relationships can't be measured or optimized through traditional frameworks. They can only be experienced and nurtured over time. I told Catherine about Elena and Diego, about my volunteer work with families facing financial crises, about discovering that helping people navigate uncertainty was more rewarding than helping wealthy clients optimize certainty. I explained that I had learned to use analytical thinking to support relationships rather than to extract value from them. Your approach will always produce optimized outcomes for the variables you choose to measure, I said, but you'll miss everything that matters most because it can't be quantified or systematized. Catherine studied me carefully, as if I were presenting an investment thesis in a language she had never encountered. So, you're choosing emotional satisfaction over optimized outcomes? She asked. I'm choosing optimized outcomes for variables that actually matter, I said. Elena and I married 2 years later in a simple ceremony at Golden Gardens Park, focused on family and close friends rather than professional networking opportunities. The reception was in Elena's parents' backyard in their modest Beacon Hill neighborhood, with Diego serving as ring bearer and my former clients mingling with Elena's colleagues from the hospital, families from Diego's school, and neighbors who had become genuine friends. Instead of a honeymoon in an exotic location chosen for social media optimization and networking potential, we spent a week camping with Diego in the Cascade Mountains, hiking trails and teaching him to identify wildlife while discussing his hopes for starting middle school in the fall. I formally adopted Diego that autumn, discovering that helping an 11-year-old understand compound interest using his allowance savings was more satisfying than managing complex portfolios for ultra-high net worth families. The adoption process required extensive financial documentation and background checks, and I realized that building security for Diego's future gave me the same systematic satisfaction I used to get from portfolio optimization, but with emotional rewards that no financial return could provide. My practice evolved into something I hadn't anticipated when I first started managing investments for wealthy clients. While I still provided portfolio management services for high net worth individuals, I became known primarily for helping people navigate the intersection of financial planning and major life transitions: divorce, medical emergencies, career changes, family crises, and retirement planning. The work required the same analytical skills I had always used, but applied them to problems where the human element was as important as the mathematical solutions. I helped families understand their options during medical bankruptcies, assisted small business owners with succession planning, and guided people through the financial aspects of caring for aging parents. I began teaching workshops for other financial advisors on what I called ethical client relationship management, how to use systematic approaches to genuinely help people rather than to extract maximum fees. The workshops became popular enough that I published a book on the subject, though my primary motivation was sharing practical frameworks rather than building a personal brand or expanding my practice. Marcus occasionally appeared in industry publications, usually promoting whatever new systematic approach to wealth management his current firm was marketing. His career followed a predictable pattern: sophisticated marketing campaigns that generated initial client interest, followed by complaints about high fees and poor communication, followed by moves to new firms where he could restart the cycle with a fresh client base. According to industry contacts, Marcus had moved to Phoenix, then Dallas, then Atlanta, each time positioning himself as bringing institutional-level strategies to local markets that were supposedly underserved by traditional advisors. His LinkedIn profile showed an impressive sequence of senior roles at respected firms, but conversations with former colleagues revealed a pattern of client complaints and internal concerns about his sales practices. Catherine remained at Cascade Digital and eventually earned promotion to Chief Marketing Officer after developing what the company described as innovative approaches to client relationship management that balance efficiency with emotional intelligence. According to mutual acquaintances, she had learned to moderate her optimization language in professional settings, though her approach to personal relationships remained fundamentally unchanged. She dated several other high-achieving professionals over the next few years, but each relationship seemed to follow the same pattern of initial strategic compatibility, followed by gradual operational inefficiency. Friends mentioned that Catherine approached dating with the same systematic methodology she brought to marketing campaigns, using detailed spreadsheets to track compatibility metrics and relationship performance indicators. 3 years after our divorce, I ran into Catherine at Victrola Coffee, the same location where she had presented her partnership resumption analysis. She was sitting alone at a corner table, working on what appeared to be a presentation about quarterly marketing performance metrics for Cascade Digital's largest client. I almost didn't approach her, but something about her focused concentration reminded me of our early days together, when I had genuinely admired her analytical precision and systematic approach to professional challenges. "Hello, Catherine," I said, stopping by her table. She looked up from her laptop with the same evaluative expression she had always used when someone interrupted her work, quickly categorizing the interruption as either valuable networking opportunity or operational distraction. "Robert, I heard you published a book about ethical financial planning," she said, closing her laptop to indicate she was willing to allocate time for conversation. "And that you adopted Elena's son. Congratulations on optimizing your personal satisfaction metrics." Catherine gestured to the empty chair across from her, and I sat down, curious about what she might want to discuss after 3 years of minimal contact. "I've been analyzing the outcomes from our partnership dissolution," she said, returning to familiar analytical territory. "Your professional trajectory, your personal satisfaction indicators, your overall life optimization results. The data suggests you made the optimal decision, though I'm still trying to understand the decision-making framework you used." She paused, studying my face as if looking for confirming indicators of some hypothesis she was testing. "I'm trying to understand what variables I failed to account for in my original analysis," she continued. "What data points should I have weighted more heavily? What optimization opportunities did I miss that could have prevented the partnership dissolution?" The question was so fundamentally Catherine that I almost smiled. Even 3 years later, she was approaching our failed marriage as a case study in analytical methodology, looking for systematic improvements she could apply to future relationship optimization challenges. "Catherine, the variables you failed to account for can't be measured through traditional analytical frameworks," I said gently. "They can only be experienced and nurtured over time through genuine emotional connection." She frowned slightly, the same expression she used when clients presented objectives that didn't fit standard marketing optimization models. "That's not actionable feedback. Experience and emotional connection can be operationalized through systematic approaches, regular communication protocols, shared activity scheduling, feedback mechanisms, satisfaction surveys. There are proven frameworks for optimizing relationship outcomes." "It's the only feedback that matters," I said. I told her about Diego's recent science fair project, where he had tested different saving strategies using his allowance money and presented his findings to the class with confidence that reminded me why financial education was important. I described Elena's approach to difficult conversations with patients' families, how she combined systematic problem-solving with genuine empathy to help people navigate impossible situations. I explained that I had learned to optimize for variables like trust, growth, meaning, and connection rather than efficiency, returns, control, and measurable outcomes. These variables couldn't be tracked through spreadsheets or improved through systematic interventions, but they determined whether relationships created genuine value for the people involved. "Those outcomes can be measured retrospectively," Catherine said, pulling out her phone to take notes. "Trust can be quantified through behavioral indicators and consistency metrics. Growth can be tracked through achievement milestones and capability development. Meaning can be assessed through satisfaction surveys and goal alignment analysis." She was right, of course, but she was also missing the point entirely, just as she had missed it throughout our 8-year marriage. "The measurement isn't the relationship," I said. "The optimization isn't the outcome. You can analyze happiness, but you can't engineer it through systematic interventions." Catherine looked genuinely puzzled, as if I were explaining investment strategies using principles that contradicted everything she understood about portfolio theory. "Then how do you ensure optimal results?" she asked. "How do you minimize risk and maximize returns without systematic planning and performance measurement?" "You don't," I said. "You commit to the process and trust that the outcomes will emerge from genuine connection rather than strategic optimization." As I walked back to my office that afternoon, I reflected on how completely my perspective had changed since my marriage to Catherine ended. For the first 8 years of my adult life, I had treated relationships like investment portfolios, carefully balanced, systematically managed, optimized for maximum return with minimal risk. The approach had produced exactly the outcomes I had designed it to produce: financial security, professional advancement, and operational efficiency. But it had also produced a marriage devoid of genuine connection, professional relationships based on transaction rather than trust, and a life optimized for everything except the experiences that actually created meaning and satisfaction. My relationship with Elena taught me that the most important aspects of partnership couldn't be systematized or optimized through traditional frameworks. They required presence, vulnerability, and commitment to supporting each other's growth without expecting measurable returns. Diego taught me that investing in someone else's development without expecting predictable outcomes was more satisfying than any financial achievement I had accomplished. My evolved approach to financial advising taught me that helping people navigate uncertainty was more meaningful than helping them optimize certainty. The analytical skills remained essential, but I applied them to support human flourishing rather than to extract maximum value from client relationships. Catherine had been right about one thing. Our marriage had been a strategic alliance optimized for mutual benefit. The problem was that mutual benefit, as we had defined it, excluded everything that made relationships worth having in the first place. Our optimization framework had been extraordinarily effective at achieving the goals we had established: wealth accumulation, career advancement, professional recognition, and operational efficiency. But those goals themselves had been fundamentally misguided because they treated relationships as means to other ends, rather than as ends in themselves. I never regretted leaving that perfectly optimized arrangement. Instead, I was grateful to have learned the difference between relationships that worked on paper and relationships that worked in reality. The former could be engineered through systematic planning and performance measurement. The latter could only be lived through genuine commitment to supporting each other's growth and happiness. Elena, Diego, and I built something that would have horrified my former self with its inefficiency and unpredictability. We made decisions based on intuition as often as analysis. We invested time and energy in outcomes we couldn't measure or control. We optimized for variables like laughter, adventure, growth, and connection rather than security, status, control, and measurable achievement. The results couldn't be captured in a spreadsheet or tracked through performance metrics, but they were evident in ways that mattered more than any quantifiable outcome. Diego's confidence as he started middle school and began developing his own approaches to problem-solving, Elena's satisfaction with her work at the hospital, and her growing leadership role in patient advocacy, my own sense of purpose in helping clients navigate life transitions rather than simply maximizing their investment returns. Looking back, I realized that Catherine's greatest mistake hadn't been the affair with Marcus, or the systematic betrayal during our divorce, or even the regulatory complaint designed to damage my practice. Her greatest mistake had been approaching love like a portfolio manager rather than like a human being committed to another person's happiness and growth. She had optimized our marriage so efficiently that she had eliminated everything that made it worth optimizing in the first place. She had treated emotional connection as a resource allocation challenge rather than as the fundamental purpose of the relationship itself. Marcus's greatest mistake had been more fundamental. He had confused sophistication with value and complexity with competence. His elaborate client acquisition strategies, complex investment products, and systematic relationship management had created the appearance of expertise while delivering outcomes that served his interests rather than his clients'. He had built a career on convincing people that complexity was synonymous with superior results, that sophisticated strategies were inherently better than simple approaches, and that paying higher fees would automatically generate higher returns. But complexity without genuine value creation was just expensive confusion. My own greatest mistake had been more subtle, but equally devastating. I had spent the first decade of my adult life optimizing for variables that didn't matter while ignoring the variables that determined whether life was worth living. I had become extraordinarily effective at achieving goals that left me feeling empty and disconnected from everything I claimed to value. I had optimized for financial security while neglecting emotional connection, for professional advancement while ignoring personal meaning, for operational efficiency while missing opportunities for genuine growth and happiness. The insight that changed everything was recognizing that optimization itself wasn't the problem. Choosing the wrong optimization targets was the problem. When I learned to optimize for trust, growth, meaning, and connection rather than efficiency, returns, control, and measurable outcomes, the analytical skills I had always possessed became tools for building rather than extracting value, for supporting rather than exploiting relationships, for creating rather than capturing meaning. This realization transformed not just my personal relationships, but my entire approach to professional success. My practice thrived not because I abandoned systematic thinking, but because I applied it to objectives that aligned with human flourishing rather than financial extraction. My marriage succeeded, not because Elena and I avoided planning and analysis, but because we used those tools to support each other's growth rather than to manage each other's behavior or optimize our household's operational efficiency. The perfect arrangement, I learned, wasn't an optimized system designed to minimize risk and maximize predictable returns. It was a commitment to building something meaningful with someone who shared your values, supported your growth, and trusted you to do the same for them. That arrangement couldn't be engineered through systematic planning, but it could be chosen through daily decisions to prioritize connection over control, growth over security, and meaning over efficiency. And choosing it every day turned out to be the most sophisticated optimization strategy I had ever discovered. Diego, now 13 and starting high school with the same analytical curiosity I had possessed at his age, recently asked me what made a successful marriage. I thought about Catherine's systematic approach, Marcus's strategic thinking, and my own evolution from optimization-focused to relationship-focused priorities. The most successful partnerships, I told him, are built by people who use their intelligence to support each other's happiness, rather than to optimize their own outcomes. Elena, listening from the kitchen where she was preparing for her next shift at the hospital, added her own perspective. And who remember that the most important things in life can't be measured, only experienced and shared. That conversation reminded me why I had learned to optimize for variables that actually mattered. The perfect arrangement wasn't perfect because it eliminated uncertainty or risk or inefficiency. It was perfect because it created space for the experiences that made uncertainty, risk, and inefficiency worthwhile. Love, growth, meaning, and the deep satisfaction that came from building something together that neither person could have created alone.